Well, good morning, everybody. Here on Tuesday morning, I kind of want to start in a little different position than I normally do, and that's showing you the latest forecast over the next 10 days, looking at the probability of getting an inch of rainfall. So one of the things we've been discussing is where this ridge is going to be that's going to settle over parts of Texas. We know that at times it's going to start to shift a bit to the east. In fact, we're going to watch right into this area later on this week the risk of some very high temperatures. They've already issued an excessive heat watch for the lower Mississippi Valley. We're going to watch that ridge come back to California and bring in some heat, or redevelop in California more likely, bringing in some heat. But it'll be the storms that run over the periphery of that ridge we're going to watch. We saw some of those last night and early this morning coming into parts of Nebraska. The question I have is, what does this particular corridor look like in terms of getting some of that moisture in place? Because we know right to the north of it, there has been pretty good model consensus that this can be a drier area. Then the north of that, we're going to see another region of more storms. So parts of the upper Midwest getting better chances of storms, and we'll see that in the near-term forecast too. And then here into this part of the Canadian prairie looking wet. Now, throughout the southeast into New England, this whole region in through here does have better chances of getting these storms to come through. And that's largely because of its position with respect to the troughs we keep talking about. Remember, some of them are coming from here. We have the flow coming over the ridge, and then there is just a broader trough in the east, which is indicative of the missing piece to this whole pattern, which is the Bermuda High. We've talked a lot about that over the last few weeks. But I just wanted you to see these latest probabilities now in this corridor have kind of maintained or come up a bit. And we're now looking at a lot of this area between 50 and 90% chance of getting an inch of moisture out of this. Now, my experience studying ridge riding thunderstorm patterns is going to come down to this, okay? They tend to move quickly in a trajectory like this, okay? They tend to just run over the ridge and move quickly. Therefore, they are not often the right setup to deliver, longer duration rainfall events. And also, ridge riding storms have a history of lining out, producing straight line wind damage. They also have the history of producing hail. There tends to be a lot of low-level heat and upper-level colder air, and that's just one of the components to getting more hail out of a thunderstorm. And so I'm concerned that when it's all said and done, we'll look at the precipitation map in here, right in through here, and it'll look a bit more like Swiss cheese than just a blanket of rainfall. So I want to always preface, when you look at these maps, these are just probability maps, and they're using the ensemble, which is lower resolution. And when we're in thunderstorm season, it is not going to resolve this perfectly. All right. Now, we'll come back to this in a little bit. I'm going to show you the GFS as well, but I want to show you where those storms are early today. So we're watching one system exit east, and this is the one that produces severe weather yesterday. Look at these storms firing yesterday afternoon, getting into the overnight. And then we watch storms come off again, into the high plains and western plains here, just blowing up into early this morning in South Dakota, into parts of Nebraska, and even farther south down into Kansas. The Pacific Northwest, remember, there's still a broad trough out here. We just continue to see storms firing in this direction. Now, when we look at yesterday's storm reports, let's blow that up a little bit. We added another 406 reports, a lot of them severe wind reports over here in the east with that system leaving. But tornadoes and also hail coming out of the storms last night right here in parts of the western plains. Now, it'll be interesting to see when they finish kind of uploading all of the new storm reports for the month of June. But this is what they currently look like for the whole year. So this is all the reports. We break them down into tornadoes. Here's the number of tornado reports. Here's the wind damage in blue. That's a lot of wind damage reports. And hail. Hail has really been one of the defining severe weather types for 2023. And if we slide down here, I just want to show you some stats of how busy June has been. Now, if you look at April and May and look at the June total number of reports, we're almost 2,000 reports more than these 2 months, and we still have more days to go. And if you come back here, they did change the unfiltered reports for the event that happened on Sunday. We're now at nearly 850 reports of severe weather on Sunday. So this just continues to unfold, and we just continue to kind of see more of the damage from the event that happened here on that frontal boundary that stretched from Michigan all the way down to parts of Arkansas. Okay, so wanted to just bring you up to speed on the latest hail data I've got as well, just to kind of show you where some of the hail fell. So a lot of this was from Sunday. Then here we go into Monday, and we watched new storms adding to some of the hail events that we've got here in the western plains again just recently. But for many in the Midwest, as the sun was rising this morning, what we're actually watching behind this system that's exiting is a lot of just very poor air quality here. So here's the remnants of the storm clusters from last night, including a large cell down here in parts of Arkansas. But just thinking about the smoke that's shown up here on satellite early this morning, I wanted to show you the latest update on where the forecast for that smoke is going. So remember, we talked yesterday about the smoke getting over to England from the wildfires that were in Quebec, but now we start to see kind of a blend. This smoke in through here is coming both from Canada and from Mexico. Now, what's very interesting about this is that you can see the smoke stretching out here south of Hawaii. There's Hawaii. And what's going to be important to the pattern is to see, as this ridge continues to dominate, will we end up getting a subtropical piece of the jet stream to come in and reinforce that? I want to show you that in just a few moments. But I want to first just go back to this last 7 days. I know we're kind of bouncing a little bit here at the beginning, but we're trying to provide context to where this is going to go. So through 12 a.m. this morning, this is the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. And one of the big reasons why I'm showing you this is because certainly we saw the deep low that curled up here last week, delivering all of this heavy rain in North Carolina. And now that low and its second piece is moving through New England. Storms just continued to fire here, but over the weekend, remember, we had the system that dumped the heavy rain here that moved into Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and also at parts of the upper Midwest. Now, I stress that for two reasons. Back at the beginning, that is now the corridor that looks to be on the northern edge of where things are going to be wetter. And then if you go look at the latest forecast from the WPC, they've also got this area. In fact, let's take it all the way back here into parts of the Canadian Prairie. That northern periphery seems to be a bit drier. Now, we have a system going through in the next couple of days here, but I just want to identify this drier stretch. I also want to be very clear about this map and what it's showing. I know it looks wet in a lot of places, but you need to make sure that you see my color bar here. I put the first contour at a 1/2 inch, the second contour line at 1.5 inches. So this is where we're probably going to be wettest. Isolated ridge running storms in this area, and then notice how very wet it will be, over parts of the Appalachian Mountains, getting up here into New England, including what's going across early this morning. So some of the early morning rains here, overnight rains, are being added to this part of Virginia, North Carolina. So here's the ridge. This is it. And what we're going to be watching here are kind of these ridge riding thunderstorm clusters that just come over the top of this ridge. That's going to be the primary source of kind of lift in the atmosphere as we look throughout the end of this week. And there is the risk of severe weather with this. So today we're going to watch very closely, right here in parts of Kansas and Oklahoma, and then again farther to the north between South Dakota and Nebraska. We're going to watch tomorrow on the 28th storm clusters that could hit parts of Minnesota and also down here in the lower Mississippi River Valley. Can you almost see the trajectory of these storms kind of coming over the top? So we've got this set up here, and then there's a low curling up in this particular region. That's where these two storm clusters are coming from. And then as we get into the day on the 29th, now it really starts to show up here. And that is what we're going to be keeping an eye on. And the day 3 outlook for Illinois, we don't want severe weather, but we know that oftentimes drought is broken by it. So we're going to keep a very close eye on how this is going to set up. As we've been saying for the last several weeks, we're not expecting the high-resolution models, which are capable of resolving convection, to be right about this. But do note how there is the expectation that some of these storms continue here through the early morning hours, at least the remnants, into parts of Nebraska and into South Dakota. And as we go forward into the Tuesday night, again, a lot of storm clusters here. But notice where the models are attempting to give us the greatest risk of severe storms, the actual pieces that are being forecast here are not being well resolved just yet. So this is just something we're going to watch late tonight into tomorrow morning. Now we've been talking about how those storm clusters, just watch, run over the ridge. I'm looking from New Mexico into Kansas and Oklahoma, then into Arkansas. See that? So we have one that kind of runs like this tonight into tomorrow, and then the second is the storm system forming up here in the upper Midwest. And as we just play this on out there through Wednesday, this is now Wednesday night, getting into early Thursday morning. This will be the time period we're going to keep an eye on this stretch for possibly getting more of that, thunderstorm activity. So that's what I meant when I say looks like Swiss cheese. I'm going to use the models in a different order than I normally do. So here comes the GFS. This is its solution. So let's just play this out there through the weekend and into early next week. Now, did you see that? The storm clusters it's attempting to generate late this week. One system here, ridge runners here and here, while one system exits New England. And then we have the second chance coming through on that ridge late this weekend. There it is. This is going Saturday into Sunday and Monday. So we play this out there a full week, and this is what the latest GFS looks like in terms of precipitation. If we compare it to normal, we can now look at those anomaly maps. And so now you start to notice where the model is not able to handle the convection, so it's got these areas where this current run is putting down heavy rain, but other areas it doesn't. Remember, we have a bad dry bias down here along the southeast coast. Let's go have a look at the European model. So as we play this forward, notice the European model doesn't even resolve the cluster of storms in through here. That's one of the weaknesses of these larger and longer range models. But then we see the ridge riding here. We see the system curling up into New England. We see the system exiting, the upper Midwest, and then the system exiting New England. We just play this forward, and again, you can see where it's attempting to produce rain late this week, Thursday into Friday, hitting parts of Illinois and Indiana where that risk is going to be here. But as we just play it on out, there's a second system that possibly follows the same boundary. And as we talked about in last night's report, I would want nothing more for the rain to come into this area, especially into Nebraska, which has been so dry, and then across Missouri into Illinois. But we take this one out a week and then compare it to average. So there we go. This is what we end up getting. So that would be the week 1 precipitation anomalies from the European. So now you can start to see why I started with those ensemble probability maps. We're identifying those corridors of wettest conditions. So we looked earlier at the ECMWF chances over the next 10 days. This is the GFS. And as normal, the GFS is more generous with rainfall, but it is also the one that typically overpredicts the rainfall. Now, that's just a comparison. We're looking for those same corridors. From here, though, take a look. We're going to give you this kind of global view of things, but this is the feature I'm watching most carefully, because there is a hint that as we work our way out there past this weekend into early next week, that this subtropical jet finally starts to exert some influence here across the United States. So now you see a bit more momentum here running up into California and then extending across the country. There still is no indication of a big Bermuda high that's returning, but this particular setup is one of the main reasons why the models continue to show for day 8 through 14, which would take you from the 4th of July to the 10th of July, just more storm activity. And the European came back in with it as well here. The GFS is a large area of wet conditions, but notice how the GFS misses this getting down into the southeast, where the European and the CPC have the rain. So the suggestion here is that the Texas Ridge, as it kind of just meanders along the southern tier of the United States, first moving into the into the Mississippi Valley, and then reforming over parts of California, just appears to be setting up for a more stormy go of it as we just progress into the month of July. Let's talk about temperatures, then we'll take one last look at July. This morning on the all hazards map, we have the air quality issues here in the upper Midwest. A few places where there are flood watches, red flag warnings coming out of Arizona into the Four Corners region, excessive heat watches, warnings, and this is the new large area of excessive heat watches that have just been issued. And that's because as we watch the temperatures go from Tuesday, triple digits in Texas, we're going to see this start to build into Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, sending 90s up into parts of Iowa, and eventually getting them over into parts of Illinois as well. Looks like Thursday might be the hottest day. We could have 104 degrees Fahrenheit in central Missouri, 101 Kansas City, 101 St. Louis, and well into the 90s throughout much of Illinois and Indiana, and then into Iowa. And then watch the west. So here we are on Thursday going into Friday, another very hot one here, but look at the heat coming into the western United States. So this is the point where the storms are here. We see the ridge pushing in this direction. That's where we're going to watch those ridge running storms. But then the formation of the ridge back into the west, delivering the heat into the western United States. So that's Sunday getting into Monday. Now, I'm going to question how long this is going to last here. Because as we look out in the longer range forecast, this gets us out there day 5 through 10, which gets you to the 7th of July. And then as we play this forward, day 10 through 15, we tend to go right back over to some cooler weather here. So does that mean that this pattern is going to have some sort of flavor like this going forward, where we have this subtropical component running over the top? That is a potential setup for this July time period. And what I want to show you is this is how well the European model did for the month of June. There are several nuances to this, but this is what its forecast was for the month of June. We always look at this in terms of just, did the model at least grab the pattern correctly? Looking at it purely from a yes-no perspective. And we could overall give the European model a decent score here. It definitely found the wetter conditions here in June, the severe weather down to the south, the wetter conditions there, and then the dryness throughout the Midwest and Great Lakes Basin. It also got this really well, plus this storm corridor, very well identified. So if we just compare this to what happened, this would be the last 30 days of precipitation as a percent of normal. So the European model's forecast and what happened. So why I am stressing this is because the new European weeklies, which we talked about in last night's in-depth, did come out with a more favorable look in several pockets of the United States for wetter conditions going into the month of July. It's also got a lot of warmth through the midsection of the country. The southeast will likely be the longest holdout for bringing in sustained warmth, and I'm going to be watching California's temperature pattern as well, because that will ultimately tell me where the ridge, which currently is living in Texas, we know it's going to kind of move over the Mississippi Valley here in the next couple of days, but it's going to be where that ridge is going to be going forward, because we're missing the other components, like the Bermuda High, just as an example. So let's keep an eye on it together, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow morning. One of my colleagues, Matt Reardon, is going to give you the forecast. I'll be traveling tomorrow morning again, and he's going to step in and help me out. So I really appreciate guys like him just ready to step up and help. So appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again on Thursday. Thanks.